Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Bill. We are in the Call of Cthulhu Keeper's book today. We are doing the final video on the magic chapter, and this video is the part 6. And all it is a recap of the whole chapter. So I'll try to cover pretty much everything again, but I'm only going to hit it in highlights and details that you would need if you needed a quicker reference than a full detailed reference. So the first thing it does is it explains what magic is, and that it's usually kept in mythos tomes, which also has its own problems when you read them, because you can go mad just reading all the tomes. So, but the tomes tend to be written in other languages, so you have to study them. If you don't know the language, it could increase your skills in that language. You start reading a mythos book with an initial reading, which gives you more or less what's in it. And with that, you'll have a better idea of what's there. After an initial reading, you can do a full study, which takes a lot longer than the initial reading. And the time for both is depending upon the keepers. It could take weeks, it could take days, it could take hours, it could take months. So you have that option when you're running the game to determine how long it takes. There's the full study option, which is a deep dive into the tome. And there's a chance certain tomes will increase other skills. And if they do, they can increase it by a D6 to a D10. Occult books won't have, unless you're using the optional rules for occult like natural like magic, which isn't really even presented here. I have an older book that was from 5th edition that gives that as an option. So without that, the occult books would increase your occult, maybe a little bit of Cthulhu mythos, but it wouldn't contain spells. And some mythos books would increase your occult. Now, as a non-believer, you can read one of these books, and you would gain all the mythos knowledge, so your mythos skill would start a lot higher than a normal character. And as long as you don't believe in the mythos, because you've never had any experience with it, you just assume these were writings of a crazy person or something. Once you have that experience, your sanity would drop by your mythos skill immediately. So the keeper doesn't have to keep track of, you should have lost this amount of sanity every time you read the book. Instead, it would just be equal to that. So if you read multiple books before you became a believer, you would lose a lot of sanity. But your mythos would also be higher. When you go to use magic, magic costs magic points, and that's based off your POW. And some spells might cost POW to initiate as well. If you cast a spell and it costs more magic points than you got, the excess is subtracted from your hit points. When you go to learn a spell from a book, you got to make a study of it, and it'll take you a couple of weeks to study it, and then you would get to make a roll on your intelligence, and it's a hard roll on your intelligence to see if you learn the spell. So that's half your intelligence score. You got to roll percentile under half your intelligence score. Now, if you learn that spell, you can teach it to somebody else, and it would take them up to just over a week, 1d8 days, to learn the spell from you, or at least to make the roll to attempt to learn the spell from you. Now, casting the spell has other issues besides the magic point cost. The main thing is magic warps reality. So warping reality would cause you to lose sanity. So casting the spell costs sanity in that sense. Observing the spell being cast can cost sanity. If the spell summons something from the mythos, then that thing it summons can cost sanity as well. You can push a roll to cast a spell if you fail to cast it the first time, but there are consequences for a pushed spellcasting roll, as well as the fact that you have to pay all the costs a second time. And there are bad things that can happen if you're in the middle of casting a spell and somebody interrupts you. Now, there were some optional rules for using the Cthulhu Mythos skill to achieve like 3 different magical effects that aren't specific spells. That if I was going to use them in my game, I'd want the players to, one person in the party specifically, to have learned a spell before anyone attempts using these 3 things, or have acquired a book that reveals how to use these 3 things. You can use your Mythos skill to cause physical harm to a target. You would spend magic points, and you would spend half of that in sanity points when you do this. And if you win a Mythos versus the POW roll of the target, the target will take damage equal to the number of magical points you used. So if you used 8 magic points, they take 8 damage. You would then lose 4 sanity for that. You can use your Cthulhu Mythos to try to banish a monster. You would have to spend magic points equal to 1/5 the monster's POW and 1d3 sanity points. And the example is a Dark Young of Shub-Niggurath. They use 14 magic points, but must expend 18 to banish it, so they take 4 hit points of damage to do this. But also in this example, they fail the roll. You can also use the Cthulhu Mythos skill to commune with the recently deceased. That one's a little extra. Could be very helpful, but it's a little extra on that. So I'd probably introduce these one at a time in like a journal or whatnot, a Mythos tome where it explains that this can be done. You need to do a few minor things, and it'd be like learning a spell, but it wouldn't be as hard to learn the spell. And it'd be very easy for them to teach it to everybody else. That's pretty much the whole thing on the Mythos magic in Call of Cthulhu. Keep the tomes, in my experience, keep the tomes rare. Don't give the players access to a lot of them. Don't give the players access to a lot of spells. The players can also use a tome as a reference. So say there's a chance that this tome might talk about some other creatures. They can roll percentile against the Cthulhu Mythos score of the tome and see if they could research whatever creature they're investigating right now in the tome and see if they can get any extra information. So that's pretty much it. If I missed anything, put it in the comments below. Hope this is helpful. Until we all game again.